All right, as I was saying earlier, very good morning to everyone on the call today. We will pick up where we left off. So if we recall with Business Environment module on Wednesday afternoon, we were discussing the kind of environment that surrounds a business, and we started considering some of the components as to what goes into forming a business, both in terms of the business model, but also about the external environment in which that business operates. So some of the concepts and content that we discussed included the business model canvas itself. We looked at the value chain analysis to understand how the internal functions of a business come together to deliver value. We also looked to discuss the different industry sectors. So if you remember, we positioned primary, secondary, tertiary sectors amongst others, if I recall correctly. So really, we were doing the positioning piece in terms of understanding, well, what does business actually mean, and what do we really kind of infer when we're discussing the business environment? What goes into making the business environment? So hopefully you were able to get a grasp of some of the fundamental components. This week onwards, we are going to be building on that. Okay, so they'll essentially treat this module like building blocks, and we're now going to be looking at what goes into forming the next part of the business. So once you've got an understanding of the environment, it's then about increasing that and making that stronger, making that better. So what we're going to do firstly is pick up where we left off on corporate sustainability. So if you recall from the lecture slides Wednesday this week, we looked at the kind of variables that come together to inform the sustainable element of organizational practice. So sustainability covers a lot of things, but essentially it's the amalgamation of economic, social, and environmental coming together. Okay, and to do that, we need to look at the different ways in which organizations engage with what we will call corporate social responsibility. So what is CSR firstly? So there's a number of different ways in which we can understand corporate social responsibility. From an academic perspective, it's kind of looking at the ethical behavior of a company towards society. Okay, if you're trying to define what corporate social responsibility is, it's essentially how an organization behaves in relation to its views towards society. There's a couple of definitions I've included from literature, which I think might be useful for those of you that are looking to discuss CSR in your assessment. But a couple that I will kind of draw your attention to. So Kotler and Lee, CSR is a commitment to improve community well-being through discretionary business practices and contribution of corporate resources. So again, it's an intention by an organization to do good, to deliver for society beyond just delivering profits and shareholder value. Similarly, the bottom quotation from Carroll, 1979, looks at how social responsibility of a business is to encompass the economic, legal, ethical, and discretionary expectations that society has of organizations at any given point in time. Again, it's about ensuring that the organization delivers on those commitments beyond just delivering a profit. So it's about ensuring that the organization is aware of the economic impact, the legal impact, the ethical impact, and the discretionary expectations that society in general has on a business. So it comes back to that ethical behavior component, okay? So that's one way in which we can understand what CSR is. Now, the actions that appear to further some social good beyond the interest of the firm, that which is required by law. Now, this is quite important, okay? So increasingly, CSR is becoming more of a legal obligation. I mean, there is some elements of CSR that companies now legally have to abide to. However, going back to the early 2000s, CSR was a fairly new concept, a fairly new component of organizational being, organizational working. And at that moment in time, CSR wasn't really required by law. It was a nice to have. It was something that made your organization stand out. It was something that gave you additional value. It was something that gave you something unique or a USP that you can use to stand out from your competitors. But what kind of things do we really mean by being a good corporate, socially responsible firm? So it's stuff like avoiding the exploitation of workers, avoiding destructive environmental practices, and also considering stakeholders, not just your shareholders. So we will discuss stakeholders a little later on this morning, but Stakeholders encompass a whole wide variety of people that are interested or have a vested interest in your organization. So we'll look at why they're important when it comes to CSR. But corporate social responsibility, similar to sustainability, is the amalgamation of business, society, and environment. And it's how the business navigates the combination of those three elements that determines how good a corporate social responsible citizen the organization is. So what sorts of issues do we concern ourselves with when we're looking at CSR? Well, essentially, we're looking at social issues, we're looking at labour issues, we're looking at human rights. Now, these are just some of the issues that we would discuss here. I mean, you can extend this beyond just the ones I've discussed, but so this list isn't necessarily exhaustive, but stuff like wages, working hours, the working conditions of employees. So these are your internal stakeholders. The freedom of association. So this is the ability to join, for example, trade unions, to join bodies that can represent you. Discrimination in the workplace, forced labour, child labour. Now, these are all internally focused issues that demonstrate how much of a corporately responsible citizen the organisation may wish they want to be. So the goals of the Bsci Code of Conduct, now this is an international body, the Bsci, and they represent fairer and equal rights for employees across the globe. So some of their practices, now a lot of organisations sign up to the Bsci, so a number of organisations do, at least on paper, claim to abide by these principles or abide by these goals. Whether or not they truly do reflect that in their organisational practice is something I will leave you to discuss, perhaps if anyone's looking at this as part of their assessment. But this is essentially the way in which the world, the global societal perspectives can be brought to the fore in organisational practice. So what about looking at what underpins this? Now, this is very much touching on theory, okay? So please don't worry if you're not quite on board with this just yet. It's useful for you to use theory to underpin when you're discussing CSR. And the reasons for that is we need to understand why CSR can be different or why CSR can mean different things around the world. So there's a couple of different perspectives or philosophies that underpin how we understand the way in which the world should work. So utilitarianism, now this tends to be, generally speaking, a fairly westernized concept. We believe mostly in utilitarian perspectives in the sense that it's all about achieving the greatest good for the greatest number. So it's about saying, how do we do what's best for the majority, okay? So it's more of a short-term sacrifice for longer-term benefits. So it's not about saying, let the rich get richer today and exploit the poor. It's about saying, how do we try to balance that? How do we achieve an outcome whereby, you know, we may have to sacrifice more today in the hope of creating a better tomorrow? So it's all about sacrificing what the present is in order to create a better future, okay? So that's the utilitarian perspective, and that tends to be quite a widely adopted doctrine in the Western world. Outcome over process. Now, this one is an interesting one because it doesn't really get practiced in any one region or area of the world in general, but essentially it acts only according to the maxim of universal law. Now, what is that? That basically means that people are seen as ends, not as means. So the notion of inviolable human rights, it's all about the process with which things are done rather than the outcome. So whilst, yes, it can be a good way to ensure that we abide by the CSR obligations, it's also about understanding that we need to ensure that we're following the right process, not necessarily achieving what is seen as the best or optimal outcome for the business. So this is quite a difficult one to quantify because it's difficult to identify what business is or isn't, you know, abiding by these principles, because at the end of the day, if you remember back to how we defined a business last time round, we said as a business that combines resources or processes resources in order to produce revenue, which in turn leads to profit. So if we now discuss the business as having an outcome over process focus, then we have to think about what does that mean in the context of CSR. Consequentialism. Now, this is something essentially that looks at how actions are based on outcomes. Now, the concept of utility or greater happiness principle, so we're tying together utilitarianism, but we're looking at the consequences of achieving that. It's a very highly subjective measure because what it requires is what's called a calculation of cost-benefit analysis. Now, this tends to be done mostly by government or policymakers. So if they're looking to invest, I don't know, say £2 billion in national infrastructure or improve schools or hospitals or something, they will look to work out what is the biggest cost benefit. Should we be investing the £2 billion in improving national infrastructure, making logistics better, making the country more attractive to foreign investment? Or do we focus on our people? Do we improve the quality of our schools and our education system? Or do we focus on healthcare and improve the access to health care, well-being services to our citizens? So cost-benefit analysis falls under consequentialism. It's all about looking at the consequences of what you do. So usually best understood by looking at politics or government, but a large element of that could be applied to businesses as well. Businesses will conduct cost-benefit analysis before deciding where to invest, where to carry out R&D activity, and where to perhaps pursue mergers or acquisitions of other organisations. Virtue ethics. Now, virtue ethics is a fairly newer concept in terms of how we understand it in its application to business. So essentially, ethical behaviour is driven by what we call the character of the moral agent. Now, you might be thinking, well, who is this moral agent? So the moral agent tends to be something that encompasses the culture of the business, the way in which the business operates. So like the organisational culture, if you'd like. So the moral agent doesn't represent any one person or individual. It represents the collective organisational culture in an organisation. Now, in some places in the world, that can be driven by religious or personal values. There's some countries where religion dictates in a large way how people behave, both in a workplace and in society. Perhaps in the Western world, we've become a lot more detached to religion, but certainly in the Eastern sphere, there's a lot more impetus given to religion and the importance of religion and personal values, even in business practice. Almost like the concept of this is the way we do business. It's just a given. It's a cultural norm. It's not something that you should be breaking. It's seen as, it's seen as something that shouldn't be done, essentially. And finally, we have the rights theory or justice. Now, this is something that's always been there, but we've never really looked at applying this to business in the past, but it's becoming increasingly important. So this is the focus on longer-term social outcomes of ethical decision-making. So it's all about thinking about human rights. So if you were to reverse 25, 30 years, there's a massive push in the world towards outsourcing and looking at low-cost or low-wage countries to carry out some of the kind of maybe more mundane or manufacturing-based roles before they then shifted towards call centre work and customer service also being outsourced. Now, what was the reason for outsourcing that? A large part was cost savings. Organisations realised that rather than paying the minimum wage in the Western countries, they can pay a fraction of that minimum wage to someone on the other side of the world and deliver mostly a similar service. So we realised that organisations were perhaps exploiting some of those labour practices in those countries that were relaxed. Maybe the governments didn't support the workers. Governments didn't have any policies in place to encourage organisations to behave in the correct way. So organisations that were in the Western world were perhaps exploiting the fact that they could get away with doing those practices in the less developed parts of the world. So it's all about looking at justice in terms of process or outcomes. So rights theory says, well, hold on a minute. Is that an ethical decision for a large corporation who's making billions of pounds, billions of dollars in the Western world to be exploiting labour and exploiting human rights across the globe? So these are some philosophical arguments. So if anyone is looking at CSR, I would encourage you to look at the application of some of these theoretical backgrounds to understand how perhaps these underpin the way in which we understand what CSR should mean in a business context. Okay. So, well, the next thing we have to think about then is, okay, we know that CSR is about doing good. It's about going beyond, just a profit motivation and looking at giving back to the community, giving back to the society in general. But what are the benefits to an organization of doing that? I mean, if you had your own company, if you were running your own organization, if you were a senior manager, Why would you want to involve your organization in CSR initiatives? Well, some of the things come around employee recruitment, motivation and retention. Employees want to work for a company that is seen as doing the right thing. I mean, yes, salary is important, and yes, benefits and package, everything comes into the equation. But if you're paying the best salary in the world, but you're seen as the most unethical company, you're exploiting child labor practices in some parts of the world, you're maybe being accused of tax evasion, or you've been involved in some scandal, your employees are less likely to want to be an affinity to you. Why? Because they know that when they then move, they'll be seen as working for that organization that has poor practice, that organization that doesn't do things properly, that has malpractices. So employee recruitment, motivation, and retention is usually best achieved by demonstrating how strong a corporate citizen you are and how strong your business feels about giving back to society. It's all about the reputation management. So think about the brand identity and how that can suffer. I don't know if you recall a few years ago, there's a famous example of Nike in the sweatshops in not the Middle East, the Far East, sorry. That was a very, very big scandal that hit Nike. And I think Nike's share price over the course of that whole scandal fell almost 56% in the space of a couple of days. So again, there can be a large financial impact, but can also be a large reputational impact. A lot of consumers started boycotting Nike. They didn't want to buy Nike because of this link to exploitation of child labour, to exploitation of human rights and violations as a result of some of the outsourcers they worked with. Now, obviously, Nike were claiming that they didn't know about these, and that may well be the case. Maybe they weren't aware of the extent to which these practices were being carried out, but to say that they were completely unaware feels superficial. I mean, one of the reasons why they went that way in the first place was to save on cost. Surely they knew that in order to achieve cost saving, there must be some form of abuse of human rights, people not being paid properly, people being asked to work 17, 18-hour shifts. So Nike came under a lot of pressure from both the society in general, but also from the investor community. Investors looked up unfavorably upon Nike for that period in time. Investor relations and access to capital. So again, thinking about the point I just made there, investment and how investors can look upon your business negatively. If you've got a positive CSR image, then investors will be more likely to invest in you because they see that there's a longer potential for your business to succeed. If your business is seen as doing the right things, then there's likelihood that people will want to invest in you. Compliance with legislation or litigation. So again, as I said, previously, if you go back 25 years, maybe CSR wasn't a legal obligation. It wasn't something that organizations were required to do by law. However, today, litigation is very, very important. Organizations that don't comply with at least the very basic fundamental concepts of CSR can often open themselves out to a massive lawsuit, which can cost millions, if not billions of pounds, on top of any potential brand damage. Licenses to operate and operational efficiency. So again, if you're abiding by CSR, you'll be likely to have what's called social capital with a business. So our community, or the society in general, I should say, will be more accepting of what your business does. There'll be operational efficiencies because there'll be less waste. How will there be less waste? Because if you're doing things properly, you'll be recycling, you'll be carrying out production in a sustainable manner, you'll be ensuring that the wastage that does get created is disposed of in the right way. So that can also be seen as a positive. And I have a short video there if anyone wants to have a look on how operational efficiency can be achieved through CSR. But essentially, it's all about having a competitive advantage, okay? What is that added value? So if you remember, when we were defining the business model, we discussed the importance of having a value proposition. When we're discussing the value chain analysis, we talked about how the different functions come together to deliver what we call value. So that's what we're looking to do with CSR as well, okay? We're looking to add value, maybe not by improving the product or reducing the cost of it, but by improving our global social citizenship. It's about doing the right thing. It's about being seen to actually care about society, being seen to actually want to give back to society. And that can be an important competitive advantage. So what are different elements that we can understand? So some models for you to consider. Firstly, we've got Dalsrud. So Dalsrud's model covers what we call the 5 dimensions of corporate social responsibility. Now, we've talked about a lot of these, so I'm not going to go into detail, but we've got the environmental component, we've got the social element, we've got the economic impact, stakeholders, which we will discuss very shortly, and what we call voluntariness. So voluntariness looks at, how much organizations are willing to volunteer to do things. It's not about doing things for profit, it's about doing things because they're the right thing to do. Volunteering time. Some of you may well have worked for organizations where your employer has asked you to volunteer your time to give back. I once worked for a large bank in the United Kingdom, and they always asked us to take 3 full days off work to give back to the community. So I was getting paid my full-time wage for that day. However, I was actually working with charities, I was working with Prince's Trust, I was working with local schools. So it's all about giving something back to the community, giving something back to society during those days. Carroll's CSR Pyramid, arguably one of the most famous or more well-cited perspectives on CSR. So this is what we call the CSR Pyramid. Now, we said already that CSR includes the economic, legal, ethical, and philanthropic expectations placed on a business by society at any given point in time. But how does the pyramid explain the business's focus? Well, we start from the bottom really with the pyramid. The first point is you need to be profitable in order to start thinking about what you're going to be doing on a CSR perspective. I mean, if you're putting money into CSR initiatives, but you're not actually making profit, it means your business model isn't sustainable. So the first thing you have to do is make sure you are profitable. So you need to be turning over a profit, because it's the profit that you will use to perhaps reinvest in CSR, to perhaps look at how you can be a better global citizen. Okay, so the profitability component is quite important. Once you've got that foundation of being profitable, you then start thinking about, okay, what do I need to make sure I'm doing at the very least from a legal compliance perspective? So when it comes to CSR, you wouldn't just start anywhere. You want to start with the very, very basics, the very, very foundational elements of CSR that now have become law. In very many Western countries, organizations are required by law to behave in an ethical manner. So there are certain things they must do. So it's all about obeying the law. So part 2, after being profitable, or the third layer of the pyramid, is looking at what you must do as an organization, to be seen as achieving the very minimal efforts in CSR. Once you've done that and you still have money to invest in CSR, you start thinking about being ethical. So we've talked about number 3 being the obligation, but number 2 is about going above and beyond the legal obligation. It's about doing what is seen by society as being just and fair. So again, government legislation goes some way towards covering that, but it doesn't actually go far enough according to some people. So organizations will often go above and beyond the legal requirement and do extra just to give back to society. So it's about being that ethical contributor. It's about understanding the impact perhaps your business is having on local community, this group of stakeholders, societal impacts, environmental impacts. It's about saying, okay, we want to give something back. We want to be seen as improving the local community, the local environment, societal practices. And then finally, if you can achieve layer 1, according to Carroll, that's when you are a truly good, corporately sociable, responsible citizen. Okay, so you're contributing resources to the community, you're trying to improve the quality of life, you're trying to do what's right for people, well above and beyond what you're required to by law. Okay, so that's the 4 layers of Carroll's CSR pyramid. But what you should take away from this is that in order to be able to contribute to CSR, you need to at the very least be profitable. Okay, without profitability, your business wouldn't be able to sustainably invest in CSR policies. I mean, yes, you could maybe invest in some CSR practice this year, but if you're not profitable, will you have enough money to do the same thing next year? The likelihood is no, you wouldn't. So the very first thing you have to do is be profitable so that you can actually sustainably invest in the proper and required CSR practices. So an example here, looking at tobacco. So obviously it's something that's become less and less fashionable over the years. I mean, there's less people smoking today, I think, than at any one point over the last 50 years or something like that. There's a statistic I saw looking at, particularly last year, because of the health implications of the pandemic, people are becoming more health conscious. But apparently 2020 saw the least number of tobacco consumers in the last 50 years than ever before. So if we look at the CSR perspective, how would organizations perhaps react? So previously, if you go back for years, many organizations have denied that there were ever links between smoking and health issues, okay? All these big tobacco companies, at the very, very kind of fundamental level, they denied any responsibility for social issues. They denied that, you know, that they were to blame. As far as they were concerned, it was a health issue, and that was the responsibility of the government. It's not the tobacco providers' fault that people were becoming ill or having serious health complications as a result of smoking or consuming tobacco. They then moved into what was called defense mode. So this is where they try to fight anti-tobacco campaigns by denying that there's an addictive nature of nicotine, and they basically lobbied governments by delaying litigation cases. So they admitted that yes, perhaps, you know, there is an element that tobacco contributes to this behaviour, but they basically fought against it. And what they wanted to do was try and show that, you know, it's not because of us, it's somebody's own decision whether or not they want to consume our product. We're not forcing them to consume the product. And they basically tried to influence the government to delay any potential litigation cases being brought against the tobacco industry. As time went on, they moved into what's called the accommodation mode. So here is when they admit that they're in a controversial industry, okay, and they're making products and marketing products that can be seen as being risky. And what they did was they started rolling out anti-smoking youth programs. So they accepted that, you know, they were responsible perhaps to the issues that people were facing with the ill health. And they deemed that, you know, they would want to try and help out certain groups, focusing firstly on youth programs to try and prevent the younger generation from considering smoking. So that was the accommodating phase. And then finally, above and beyond that, they've now gone into what we call pro-action phase. Now here's when they're considering the perspectives of different stakeholders. They're seeking to go above and beyond industry norms. All the government expects is that they market effectively. They market by not, you know, making the product visible. So if anyone is a smoker, if you go into your local grocery store in the Western world nowadays, cigarettes are no longer visible. You can't see cigarettes when you walk into any grocery shop. They're hidden behind a shutter. So, you know, if you ask for cigarettes, the lady behind the counter goes to the desk, she opens the shutter, takes out the cigarettes and closes the shutter again. Why do we do that? Well, they do that because they want to prevent it being visible. The more something is visible, the more likely you are to want to consume it. So again, organizations move from starting off by denying any responsibility to finally saying, okay, perhaps, you know, we are somewhat responsible because we are creating this product, we are marketing this product. What can we do to help make things better? Okay, so that's just one example of CSR being applied in practice. So thinking about that then, and thinking about, you know, corporate social responsibility, well, whose responsibility is it then to, you know, manage an organization's effort? So this is where we look at what's called corporate governance. If anybody attended my strategic leadership lecture module, you will have seen, you know, how I discussed in detail the importance and the significance of corporate governance. But corporate governance is basically a system by which companies are directed and controlled, okay? So it's basically the way in which the organization is run. So corporate governance refers to the structures and processes for the direction and control of companies. So corporate governance is essentially the links between board of directors, the shareholders, and the management, so that they try and encapsulate everything. It's a way in which people represent those different stakeholders and they bring together those perspectives. So with corporate governance, the aim is to align as nearly as possible to the interests of individuals, corporations, and society. Okay, so corporate governance isn't about just the profit motivation. It isn't just about CSR or you know, doing what's right by your employees, or, you know, creating better working conditions. It's about everything. It's about trying to align as much as possible so that you can try and meet the obligations, to try and meet the expectations of different individuals, society in general, and the corporation itself. However, despite the best efforts, of organizations, things can go wrong. Okay, things can go very, very wrong. Now, these are some of the things that perhaps you may have heard of in recent news articles, and recent perhaps news that's been spread across different industries, across different countries. But bribery, maybe not as much, or maybe not visible, at least in the Western world, but certainly in some parts of the world, bribery is seen as a way of doing business in order to get a contract, in order to, you know, get a job, sometimes even in order to be able to secure a piece of work. Sometimes in some parts of the world, bribery is seen as a common practice. Now, again, in the Western world, we see that as being very wrong, it's unethical, but in some parts of the world, that is how business is done. Coercion. Coercion is where you're trying to manipulate someone to do things a particular way. So again, it can be through blackmail, it can be through perhaps bribing again. It can be done in a few different ways. It's all about manipulating someone or a body of people to act in a way that otherwise wouldn't. Insider trading. Now, this is probably something, if anyone's watched some of these films based on the stock market crash or based on the financial markets, you'll see that insider trading is something that can go very, very wrong. Insider trading is something that can cost the stock market, but also companies billions of pounds or dollars. Conflicts of interest. Now, again, this one is something that maybe isn't reported on enough, but conflict of interest can arise, particularly where, you know, people have links that they don't disclose. So if you've got both family or personal relationships, you know, that can cause a conflict of interest between competitor, between different positions in an organization, that can be potentially damaging to how the business performs and how the business goes about doing what it should do. Unfair discrimination. So here is where perhaps, you know, certain groups in society are being discriminated against as a result of their sex, their skin color, their ethnicity. So it's all about making sure that we're not discriminating against people, disabilities, for example. So it's about ensuring that, you know, organizations are seen as doing the right thing. That's become perhaps even more important in the last 12 months on the back of the Black Lives Matter movement, and organizations with the need to be seen as being diverse. So unfair discrimination can be quite important, but it's not just about that. It can also be about, you know, employment law. Some organizations you know, fire their employees unfairly, don't treat their employees properly. That's also examples of unfair discrimination. Political donations and gifts. Again, perhaps not as visible in the Western world. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it's certainly not as visible. But again, in some certain countries across the globe, in order to get business done, if you're looking to invest in a foreign country, sometimes you have to give what are called political donations or gifts to certain ministerial positions in that country in order to have your application accepted. So again, it's almost a form of bribery, but it's about paying people or giving donations and gifts that make you or allow you to win a contract. False presentations and statements. Now that's quite a dangerous one, because that's not only just bad practice, it's also against the law, because most of the time you have to give these statements under jurisdiction, you have to give them under oath in some cases. So it can be a potential concern for litigation. And finally, the accumulation of profits by illegal means. Again, not as prominent perhaps in large corporations, but certainly perhaps in smaller and medium-sized enterprises, doing things the way they should be done, doing things illegally is bad. But there's more examples, I'm sure you can think of some. Essentially, what I'm trying to get across to you is the business world is full of bad ideas. However, it's also full of opportunities. And sometimes the line between what's good and bad can be very, very thin. People that start off with the intention of being good can often fall on the side of being bad. Sometimes intentionally, other times by circumstance. However, it is important that we consider ethical practice within businesses. So an example, just to bring things to life. So I'm sure most of you will have heard at some point the story of Apple and Foxconn. So in 2010, basically the whole world was shook to learn about the number of suicides that were happening in Foxconn. So there was a global scandal which led to a doubling of basic wage in China. So the impact of this actually led to the CCP in China, the reigning party that holds power, to raise the basic wage in China because of what happened. So essentially the world's largest OEM, or electronics manufacturer, in Foxconn, they have 1 million workers in China. So that's how big Foxconn is. They're not just a small, factory in the middle of nowhere. They have 1 million workers across China. So the massive OEM electronics manufacturer. The working conditions of their employees were so stressful that it led to a number of migrant workers in China committing suicide. I think at one point, in 1 week, 10 workers committed suicide at Foxconn. And how did they have to react? Well, they increased the salaries by 1/3, and employee-trained counsellors were brought in. They installed more leisure facilities. They tried to improve the working conditions. Now, arguably, had people not died, had that global attention not been put on Foxconn, there probably wouldn't have been these changes brought into play. Foxconn only reacted because the world's eyes were on them. Apple were a big contract provider. They were a big customer for Foxconn. Foxconn put together a lot of Apple iPhones, particularly iPads as well. So for them, the potential of losing Apple was so big that they actually reacted and did things the right way. Excuse me. So it's a good link to a video if anyone wants to watch it. If you just type in Foxconn Apple suicides, you'll see there's a documentary that discusses how Foxconn had to improve its CSR image and do what's right by workers by improving their working rights. Okay. So coming back to CSR, another couple of ways in which we can understand CSR, we have what are called the 4 pillars of corporate governance. Now, again, for those of you that attended my strategic leadership module, you will be familiar with these. So accountability, which is all about ensuring management is accountable to the boards and that the board is accountable to share owners. It's all about accountability. It's not about one party having power. It's about each party being accountable to one another. Fairness, it's about protecting the share owners' rights. So yes, shareholders have invested and they want, the business to be operating in the right manner. I mean, if you've invested multi-millions of pounds or thousands of pounds in a business, you would want it to be doing the right thing. You don't want it to have bad publicity. You don't want it to have bad CSR. It's also about treating all share owners in the right way, including minorities. So even if someone only holds, a fraction of a share, they're still a shareholder. So it's about doing what's right by each individual where possible. Now, obviously, businesses can have hundreds of thousands of shareholders, so it's not easy to represent every single person, but it's about representing the vast majority. Transparency, it's about making sure that any information, any communication is done timely. It's about accurate disclosure of all materials that matter, including the financial statement, performance of the company, the ownership, and corporate governance. So again, that's not to say that they should be sharing secret strategies in terms of what the next 5 years looks like, what they're currently working on. No one's going to share that. I mean, that's highly sensitive, that's highly secret. But it should be sharing the performance. So looking at past performance, how have they performed over the last 12 months, the last quarter. It's about being able to demonstrate that they are transparent, they're sharing the performance of the enterprise with the external world. And finally, responsibility, which is all about recognizing stakeholder rights. Okay, it's about encouraging cooperation between the company, its stakeholders, and creating wealth, jobs, and economic sustainability. Essentially, the key objective with corporate governance, is to ensure that the governing body of the organization acts with integrity and operates for the good of the business. Basically, it's balancing the influence upon decision makers of both shareholders and other stakeholders. Okay, that's why corporate governance exists. and it's down to corporate governance practices, corporate governance policies to ensure that the organization protects each key stakeholder group. So again, touching on some of the CSR perspectives and bringing corporate governance beyond just the boardroom, it's also thinking about ethical governance, okay? So by ethical governance, it's about having an ethical code of conduct, the way in which we should behave, both legally, but also morally, doing the right thing. It's about having an ethics committee, people that hold the organization to account. I mean, we're all partial to perhaps having some biases, to perhaps making wrong decisions, or we can't always behave accurately and properly at all times. So the ethics committee's job is to hold people to account, to make sure that if someone does slip up, you know, they recognize that and they rectify that and they show that, you know, they've got true, genuine remorse. Transparency in working, so making sure that, you know, the organization is sharing information such as what we discussed, you know, performance measures, financial performance, corporate governance reports. It's about penalties. So if an organization does, you know, fall foul or stakeholders fall foul, it's about holding them to account by penalizing them. It's about having fraud and corruption registers to manage and to ensure that people are doing the right thing. It's about having contract procedure rules. It's about anti-fraud and corruption policies. And finally, a risk assessment is quite important, looking at what ethical risk a decision could pose. You know, if you're looking to invest in a company that's got a mixed record, shall we say, in CSR, or perhaps they've been implicated in malpractice or bad business practices, then a risk assessment is usually quite important to carry out as part of your due diligence before you acquire that company or before you sign a contract to partner with that company. So risk assessment can be important. Essentially, this is kind of more general kind of conclusion here. In any type of social system, if defectors are not punished, it can lead to contamination, and that then leads to more defectors. What do you mean by that? So if in our group we've got, what, 8 people on this call, if one person gets away with something that they shouldn't, you know, it's ethical malpractice, then there's almost an incentive for the rest of us. We might think, well, hold on a minute, they did something wrong, they never got punished, they got away with it, maybe I should do it too. And that has a knock-on effect, okay? It's almost like a domino effect. When one person gets away with it, other people think, well, if he or she can do it, why can't I? So it's all about nipping it at the bud. So it's all about applying those ethical policies at the very, very beginning so that people don't catch on. It's almost about making a show of someone. If someone does do the wrong thing, it's about ensuring that, you know, you demonstrate that there is punishment for that type of behavior. Couple of examples of what we call ethical fashion. So on the left-hand side, this is the exact same facility. Okay, we're looking at the Kabiria slum in Kenya. Now, I think it was H&M. I could be wrong, but H&M were using this place for some of their garment manufacture. Okay, some of the clothing. So if you look at the conditions on the left-hand side of your screen, I mean, clearly this is, you know, not acceptable. Can you imagine if in the United Kingdom there was a factory that looked like this? It's a factory that didn't seem to have any kind of clear, you know, forms of anything really, you know, by the looks of it. They don't have any kind of sanitary measure. They don't have any kind of sense of having look at the factory itself. It seems to be a dark, hidden off building, and I don't think it's probably very safe either. So what happened? Well, they ended up investing in the facility. So that same place that you can see on the left-hand side now looks like this. So they've basically looked at improving the facilities. They've looked at providing machinery that's appropriate, buildings that house, you know, workers appropriately. They've given workers proper working stations. They have proper breaks. They have, you know, set times. They work shifts. It's no longer about, you know, coming into a building that doesn't have the necessary facilities and, you know, trying to make what's best. It's about doing the right thing. Okay. So that's the Kabiria slum in Kenya and how H&M, I think it was, transformed as a result of the focus on being ethical in the fashion industry. And that's something that's continuing, ethical fashion. As I mentioned earlier, the focus on Nike earlier. Nike's not the only organization. There's been lots of other organizations that have been affected, H&M particularly. Marks and Spencer's were in the news not too long ago. There's lots of organizations that have come under fire because of malpractice and unethical behavior in the fashion industry. But that's a positive example there of what H&M did. So let's move on to stakeholders now. So we thought about corporate governance, we thought about the importance of CSR, but what about stakeholders and why are they important? So again, it's quite important that we make this distinction, because sometimes when we mention stakeholders, people just think of them as shareholders. There's a big difference. So stakeholders are all of those claimants, both inside and outside the firm, who have a vested interest in its problems and its solutions. Okay? So what we mean by that is everyone that has some kind of interest in the business, whether they're employees, whether they're shareholders, whether they're managers or the CEO, board of directors, whether they're the local government committee, whether they are local community, whether they are activist groups, they all can be seen as stakeholders or people that are interested in how the business operates and how the business works. So any person or organization who can be positively or negatively impacted by or cause an impact on the actions of a company. So these are some of the ways in which we can understand stakeholders. So imagine this situation, you're a consultant and you're working for a client. Now that's a form of a stakeholder too, but there's other stakeholders that are still important, because part of your client's problems are going to be to predict what other stakeholders will do, or perhaps try to influence what they will do. So if you're brought in as a consultant by a company to work for them, you need to have a wider understanding of the stakeholders. It's not just about the employees or the management or the board of directors. It's about the wider community, the shareholders, the local community, activist groups in the region, even competitors or suppliers can be examples of stakeholders in your business. So it's people that are interested, people that want to know about your business, people that are looking for you to either slip up or potentially do the right thing, depending on what your business is doing. These are people that want to be seen to do the right thing, both by their own business, but also by yours. So when we're looking at stakeholders, one of the best ways in which we can understand who stakeholders are is to conduct what we call a stakeholder analysis. So what do you mean by that? So it's basically coming up with a stakeholder map. So we identify all the stakeholders. That's stage one. Okay, we brainstorm, we put them all down. And I've given you an example here. So these are just some of the stakeholders that can affect a business. We identify stakeholder needs and interests. So why are they interested in our business? What do they want from us? We then start to classify these groups. Are they internal or are they external to our business? We then identify areas of conflict. We identify areas of conflict. So where are there perhaps conflict of interest? Where are there perhaps groups that want competing things? One group might want a particular thing, it might be interested in a particular area of the business, whereas other firms are interested in something different. Prioritizing and reconciling and balancing. So that's the next stage. Once you've identified those areas of conflict, we need to prioritize which stakeholders are the most important that we need to manage and look after closely. Which are the stakeholders that we need to reconcile? Try to make sure that they're happy. What are the stakeholders we need to balance in terms of making sure that we've considered all the different perspectives? And finally, it's all about finding synergies and alignments. So when it comes to stakeholders, we need to recognize what are the relationships between the stakeholders, what are the relationships, what are the synergies between them. Okay, where are the areas of overlap? Where are the areas in which these stakeholders align or don't align? How can we get them to align? Okay, so that's a stakeholder analysis map. We then take that forward further. Once we've done the stakeholder map, we're looking to produce what's called a power interest matrix. Okay, so this is quite important because this is how organizations structure their stakeholders, so they know when to talk to people and how to react to people. So power interest matrix basically classifies stakeholders in relation to their power and the extent to which they're likely to show interest in the actions of the organization. So what do we mean by power and what do we mean by interest? So power basically is how they affect what happens, okay? what actions can they take that will affect the outcome or the result of what we are doing. And the interest is their stake in the situation. Some people are likely to have a higher stake in the situation than others. It's about understanding what interest some stakeholders have in your business. So that's how we define power and interest. So when we are starting to map them out on the power interest matrix, so if we look at the left-hand side, the 2x2 grid, on the left-hand side of the scale, we have power, so from low to high. And then on the bottom axis, we have interest from low to high, okay? Now, in the top left-hand corner of that matrix, we have people that have high power. So they're on the top end of the power scale, but then the low end of the interest scale. So we call them the people that fall into the high power, low interest area. So for example, customers perhaps don't really have an interest in what policies or strategies your business is pursuing. However, they've got high power. Why do they have high power? Because they could stop buying your product tomorrow, which means you don't make any profits. Okay, so they've got a lot of power, but relatively little interest in what you're doing, or relatively little interest perhaps in the policy or the strategy you're looking to implement. Similarly, sponsors might fall into that bracket. So sponsors probably have a little bit more interest because, you know, they're putting their name behind you, they're sponsoring you, but their power is quite high as well. They could withdraw at any time if they feel that your organization behaves in the wrong way or follows unethical practice. In the top right-hand corner, we have what's called high power, high interest. Now, these are the most important people in terms of people that you need to actively manage, okay? So here you've got people like, for example, an executive, a project manager, an SME, so someone that's got expertise in the business, and finally a BA, someone that's an analyst in your business. So they are powerful because they can control what your business does, they can influence what your business does, but they also have a wide interest because they're working for you. A lot of these roles, project manager, an executive, a business analyst, a subject matter expert, these are all people that have a direct vested interest in what your business is doing, and you want to make sure that they're behaving in the right way, they're doing the right thing, so you're actively managing what they're doing. In the bottom right-hand corner, we have people that have a high interest but low power. So again, a supplier might be interested in what your business does, but they can't really affect your strategy or policy. I mean, you know, they might try to, but you could then simply switch supplier. So they don't really have a lot of power, but they certainly have a high interest in what you're doing. People such as internal users, so maybe your internal employees, again, they have a high interest in what, you know, investments you're making in R&D, what investments you're making in technology or manufacturing products, etc. But they don't really have much power in terms of which ones you invest in. If you choose to invest in high-end, you know, high-spec machinery, or you choose to invest in, you know, middle of the range or low quality, you know, your internal users can't really influence that. All they can do is have an interest in what you purchase for them. And there's other few examples in there as well that you might want to consider. And finally, low interest, low power. In the context of what I've shown here, this can be people that, for example, work in the admin team or systems admin team. All they really do is provide a service. You know, they provide your IT, they provide, you know, support to your workers. Help desk, again, similar concept. They don't really have a lot of power and perhaps like an interest in your company. All they do is provide help and support if and when required along, for example, the ordering system. So your customers might call them and they might engage with them in terms of how to use the product, how to you know, make the most of the product they're buying. So I guess what we're trying to say here is the reason we have a power interest grid is to understand which group of stakeholders are more important at any given point in time. Now, stakeholders can move, okay? Just because someone is sitting in low interest, low power today, doesn't mean they're always going to be there. They can move. And stakeholders can be different depending on the situation you're looking at. So for example, the 2x2 grid I've given you is based on the customer ordering system. So, you know, they're looking to perhaps invest in a customer ordering system. That's the business decision. They're looking at what stakeholders they need to engage and manage in that context. But what if they were looking to, you know, move abroad, or they're trying to internationalize, or, you know, move into foreign countries where, you know, there's expertise in a particular area? The stakeholders would be very, very different, you know, Perhaps your internal project manager or business analyst wouldn't be high power, high interest. You know, probably more looking to engage external bodies. We're more looking to engage experts that work in cultural or cross-country negotiations, etc., etc. So the stakeholders themselves can move depending on the situation you're analysing. And the grid that you can see, the 3x3 grid that's lying next to it, just shows, so if you map that grid across to a 2x2 matrix, it just shows who you need to actively manage. So top right-hand corner, high power, high interest people, you need to actively manage them. The bottom left-hand corner, these are people that have high power but low interest. You need to watch them, you need to make sure they're happy because they've got high power, they can influence very, very quickly what your business does, but they don't really have much interest in doing that. So you just need to watch them to make sure that you're keeping them happy. Bottom left-hand corner, these are people you just need to generally make sure they're kept in the loop here and there. Okay, it's just about giving them general communication. So it's about having little power, little interest. Okay, so those people that they're there, nice to know they're there, and perhaps you want to communicate with them every so often to keep them in the loop, but we're not really doing anything to actively manage them. And finally, in the bottom right-hand corner, these are people with little power but high interest. Well, because they're interested, you want to keep them in the loop. You want to make sure that you're sharing any kind of updates, any kind of transparency based outputs, such as financial statements, such as performance measures, such as corporate governance updates. These are the people that want to see them. Okay, cool. That was very much a whirlwind tour of corporate social responsibility and how different areas of organizational practice are affected by CSR. We looked at different models, we looked at theories that impact CSR, we looked at corporate governance and the significance of corporate governance. And then finally, we just rounded off with thinking about stakeholders and why stakeholders are important and how perhaps we can start to map them out or understand them. So again, if anyone does an assessment looking at the role of stakeholders in influencing, CSR or influencing other areas of the business, it might be quite interesting to include a power interest matrix, okay? Thinking about how you would map out the stakeholders in that given situation. Cool, okay. So what we'll do is we'll have a quick break. So let's break for 5 minutes. It's now 11 o'clock on my watch. So we'll come back in 5 minutes time and we will start the next section of the module. We're going to move into looking at the economic background and economic kind of foundations that influence what a business does, okay? Fabulous. Right, I'm just going to press pause on the recording and we can have a quick break. Fabulous. Okay, so next up, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to focus on the kind of significance of the economic environment on a business. So what do we mean by business economics, and what's the fundamental purpose of economics, and how does it relate to what a business does? So for that, we're going to really try and get underneath the foundations of what is economics. So if anyone has any backgrounds in economics already, apologies, this might be slightly similar or vaguely similar to what you already know. For those of you that don't, I'm going to really try to get underneath the fundamentals of why economics is basically fundamental to everything that we do, not just business practice, but also in our everyday lives. So that's what we're going to focus on for the latter half of this morning. So what is economics, firstly? Okay, so essentially, it's a social science which looks at covering the actions of individuals and groups of individuals in the process of producing, exchanging, and consuming goods and services in order to achieve optimization of resource use. So again, a fairly loaded definition, but essentially it looks at how we as rational human beings, but also as individuals that work for enterprises, also as groups of people, how we produce, exchange, and consume goods and services in order to optimize, so in order to ensure that we're achieving the maximum utility from particular resources. So again, we all make decisions on a daily basis as to what we're going to eat, what we're going to wear, how we're going to spend our money. These are all decisions that we do on a daily basis without even thinking about it, but they're all what we would call an economic transaction. Okay, these are all things that from an economic perspective are quite important. But how does it impact the business? And that's really our focus, isn't it? So we want to know about production decisions. How do businesses decide what to produce and how much to produce? What are the exchange decisions? When do businesses decide or individuals decide that they want to transact, they want to sell certain resources, certain products and services for a particular type of resource, usually cash or money? And what about consumption decisions? How do consumers, individuals like you and I, decide how much we want to consume? These are all quite important because they will fundamentally determine how much money and how much consumption our business can cater for. According to Lord Robbins, who's a very kind of famous person within the economic landscape in the United Kingdom, he sits in Houses of Parliament and he's been elected by peers into a lordship position. Economics is the science which studies human behaviour as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. So essentially what he's trying to say is economics is basically us trying to study the behaviour of human beings in which we have a relationship whereby we need to try and maximize what we have and make the most of our resources. Every single individual today who's on this call made an active choice to want to join this session. Now you decided to spend your time this way. You could have used that time to do something else. So that was a conscious decision that you made. Okay, so it's all about how you decide to spend your resources, and time is a resource. And I'm sure some of you are maybe, sitting in an internet cafe. Some of you may be sitting at home using Wi-Fi, using broadband, using, internet connections. You're paying for those. You're choosing to spend your time and your money to attend this session. Okay, so that's what I mean by economics, about understanding the decisions that we make and why we make them. So what are the essentials of economics? Well, basically, economics is a study of how individuals, businesses, and societies make those decisions about ways in which they use scarce resources to fulfill wants and needs. But firstly, what is scarcity and what do we mean by scarce resources? Well, resources are finite, they're limited, okay? We only have a certain amount of particular resources in the world. For example, coal, gas, as we know. Even stuff like water, access to clean water is finite. There's only a finite amount of clean water that's available in the world. And as we've seen already, in some parts of the world, they don't have that access. So water is a finite resource. Money is a finite resource. I mean, yes, potentially you could say, why does a country print more money? But that's not always good either, because that can lead to concerns. Countries that have currencies where they spend millions of, the notions every single day is a problem, because you don't want to be in that position where you printed off so much money, the value of your currency just depreciates. So money is a scarce resource. Time is a scarce resource. Now, this is quite a scary thought and probably not something people want to think of. But at the end of the day, we all have a time limit. At one point, we're all going to die. So time is a scarce resource. How you choose to spend that time is up to you. So scarcity basically says that resources that we have access to, land, labor, capital, time, effort, everything is limited. However, our wants and needs are unlimited. Everyone on the call probably has their own dreams, their own aspirations, their own things that they want to achieve. There's things they want to buy, things that they want to consume. But we only have a limited amount of time and a limited resource in terms of how we achieve that. And that's basically the fundamental purpose of economics. Economics tries to model that behavior. So because of that behavior, how does that impact businesses? How does that impact the decisions that we make? How does the decisions that we make impact how an organization behaves? Okay. So there's two perspectives in economics, and today we're going to focus on the second one predominantly. We'll look at macroeconomics in the session next time when we look at the role of government, competition, markets, etc. But today is very much the micro. But what do we mean by micro then? It's all about the focus on individuals and businesses to make economic decisions. So my next point is, well, we say that it's about the focus on decisions, but what kind of decisions need to be made? Well, firstly, the decision as to what to produce is quite important. I mean, At the end of the day, there's millions, billions of products in the world, goods and services. Why does a business choose to produce a particular good or service? That's a conscientious decision. So what's the justification for making that decision? Economics tries to model that. How much to produce? Again, you can try and produce as much or as little as possible. Sometimes that's decided for you. I mean, resources, as I said already, are finite. You might only have so much money to invest in raw materials, to invest in facilities, to invest in workers. But on the other hand, it also comes down to demand and supply, which we will discuss later. What's the point of you producing millions of units if it's only consumed in thousands? What are you going to do with the excess supply? So the decision to produce is also an economic decision. How to produce the product, that's an economic decision too. I mean, why would you not just invest lots of money into technology and automate all of your processes so everything is done by machine? You don't need people. Machines don't make mistakes, you know, they're programmed to do things correctly. Yes, they might make a mistake in every 1 in 1,000, but you know, realistically, machines are more programmable and also less likely to succumb to error. So, you know, how do you produce? How many people do you hire? Where do you decide to set up your business operations? All of these decisions are fundamentally driven by economics because it's all about resources that you have available to you as a business enterprise. For whom do you produce? That's another economic decision. The market is massive and both domestic, international. You know, who do you choose to focus on? Why do you choose to focus on that group of customers? How can that group of consumers or customers influence your decision to produce? So again, these are decisions that businesses have to make. And finally, who gets to make those decisions? That's quite important too. Who is the final say? And that's kind of some of the elements we discussed earlier as well when we're looking at business governance. You know, what's the role of corporate governance? What's the role of senior stakeholders? So who gets to make those decisions is quite fundamental when we look at it from an economic perspective. So let's break it down. We've talked a lot about resources. I said, you know, resources are finite, but well, what are resources? How can we understand resources? Well, basically they're inputs that can be used to produce goods and services. That's the fundamental way in which we can understand them. And what goes into making a good or service? Well, you've got labor. Labor is a resource, so people. We've got capital. You need money to produce goods and services. I mean, you can't just magic up raw materials. You can't just not pay your workers. So you need capital. You need money to invest. You need technology, machinery. You know, if you're producing something that takes a lot of manpower. You know, for example, this container shipyard. By the looks of it, if it wasn't for these big extending forklift trucks, you know, you wouldn't be able to lift the container into place. So again, the machinery and the technology that's required, that's a resource, that's an input. Land itself is an input. I mean, that shipyard, someone needs to have acquired the land to host those containers. If you don't have the land, well, where are you going to put the containers? So land, labor, capital, these are all examples of some of the internal or external resources that go into producing goods and services. But as we said already, there's a problem, and that problem is scarcity. So individuals, as we've discussed already, have unlimited wants and unlimited needs. You know, we all have dreams, we all have aspirations, we all have things that we want to do, want to consume, want to be able to afford, want to be able to buy for others even. But unfortunately, we only have a finite number of resources. So how do we, you know, decide where to invest our money, where to invest our resources, how to live our life essentially? It comes down to making choices, okay? As I was trying to allude already, we all have choices to make. As I said earlier to everyone that was on the call, you chose this morning to join this call, to join this lecture. That's a choice that you made, okay? No one forced you to join. Some of you may have wanted to learn more about this topic. Some of you are maybe thinking, I've paid a lot of money for this education course. I want to make the most of my money. I want to attend. I want to learn something new. But it's a choice, okay? No one decided that for you. That's a choice that you made to join this call. So how we do what we do always comes down to making the choice, okay? So no matter how scarce our resources are, it's our choices that define how we use them. But the question then becomes, well, why do we make choices and why is that important? Well, as we've said already, all resources, goods and services are limited. We need to make choices. We can't use that same amount of money. The money that you spent on this course, or this module, this education facility, you could have spent somewhere else. Maybe you could have bought yourself you know, some new clothing. You could have bought yourself new technology, maybe bought yourself a new mobile phone. Or you could have invested that money in the stock market. You could have invested it in the bank for interest. You could have done anything at all with that money. You made a choice to spend it on this course. So there's a reason why you did that, okay? And we make these choices every single day about how we're going to spend our money, time, and energy so that we can fulfill our needs and wants, okay? For example, if I have £1 in my pocket right now, what am I going to do with that £1? Should I go and spend it and buy something? I don't know, maybe a chocolate bar or a can of juice. Should I maybe put that £1 in an investing account, try and make money on it, try and make interest, try and make a return? Or do I save that £1, you know, and keep adding to it every week? Any spare change I have in my pocket, put it in a piggy bank. These are all choices that I have to make with my resources. Similarly, everybody in the world has to make that choice. This morning, as I said, beyond just this class, when you got up this morning, you must have chose what to have for breakfast. You must have chose what to wear today. You must have chose what you're going to do. You created your to-do list, your tasks for the day. We all make choices on how we're going to spend our time, our money, our effort on making the best of what we have, okay? So choices are important. And in economics, what we're trying to do is create assumptions, create models, create understanding of why we behave in a particular way. So that's why we're trying to understand the fundamentals firstly. So coming back to that perspective on needs versus wants, we've just said you have to make a choice because we all have needs and wants, but how do we define needs and wants? So there's a distinction to be made here, okay? Needs are things that we must have to survive. Generally speaking, these are things like access to food, shelter, clean clothing, water. These are kind of things that we want, okay? These are the kind of things we need. Apologies. Needs are things that we must have in order to survive. Without them, surviving can become difficult. Wants, on the other hand, are usually different, and the reason why they're different is because they're things that we would like to have. So, for example, I got a 45-inch TV, but I would really love to have a 65-inch TV. Expensive jewelry, you know, why can't I have a 24-carat bracelet, 24-carat gold chain, 24-carat ring, you know, yellow gold, expensive jewelry? Maybe it's something people aspire to have. Flash cars, you know, why do I want to just drive around in a small BMW 3 Series when I potentially could be driving around in an Aston Martin or a Bentley convertible? Everyone wants to have flash cars. These are things that we want. And other luxuries as well. But the difference is wants are things that are nice to have, okay? They're luxuries, they're things that we have a choice on, potentially. Needs, on the other hand, tend to be things that, at the very, very least, we should have in our lives. So the example I'll make is if anyone's feeling thirsty, what would they drink? Post it in the chat for me, guys. If you're feeling thirsty right now, tell me what you would drink. A couple of chats coming through. Let me just open them up. Someone said water. Someone else said water. Someone said tea. Anyone else? You're feeling thirsty. What are you going to drink? Another one saying water. Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. Well, thank you to those of you that contributed. So looking at that there, right, you have a choice. You choose what you're going to drink, don't you? No one can force you, unless of course you run out of certain things, which is fair enough. You only have, maybe water is the only thing you can consume, but you have a choice. You can choose to drink water, or you can choose to drink something else. So a lot of you said water. Now water you could say is a need, okay? It's very fundamental. Like we talk about needs being access to clean water, food, shelter, the very, very basic things we need to survive. So a lot of you covered the need. You were thirsty, you need to satisfy that need, you drank water. Somebody said tea. Now again, tea, I'm not going to say is a luxury because a lot of us are able to access and have tea, but in the grand context of things, it is a luxury because you're now spending money on tea bags, you're spending money on sugar, you're spending money on milk if you're putting milk in your tea. So you're going above and beyond, okay? So it's about a want. You might want to have tea, but to satisfy your thirst, you don't need to have tea, you could just drink water. And also the example someone gave there of energy drinks, absolutely. Why would you, or what's the reasons for you wanting to pick up a can of energy drink rather than a glass of water from the sink, which is relatively cheap or free in most cases. So again, thinking about the decision there, the difference between needs and wants, okay? A need is satisfying something that we need to do. For example, I need to have a drink because I'm thirsty. So that's a need. How I choose to satisfy that need comes down to my choices. I can choose to have water, which might be the most efficient way in terms of resource allocation. I'm not having to spend a lot of money on water. It's relatively cheap. It's easily accessible. I don't really have to go anywhere. I don't really have to put an extra effort. I don't have to use up my time. For example, if I was making a cup of tea, it would take longer. So again, thinking about the choices and what we decide to do, that's what differentiates between our needs and wants. Now, it can be difficult to always just say we're following our needs. I mean, can you imagine if all you could ever drink was water? You couldn't drink anything else? Well, in that case, you would be satisfying your needs. You wouldn't be thirsty, but you might not be very happy consuming just water all the time. Similarly, with wants, I mean, yes, it would be nice to be able to, buy new TVs, expensive jewelry, flash cars, but do I really need that? Probably not. I mean, I could wear simple jewelry. I could wear, does it need to be 24 karat gold? Can I not just wear plastic jewelry? So just thinking about how we choose to spend our resources, that comes down to our wants, whereas this need to satisfy is talking about what we require, okay? So that's a differentiation I want you to keep in mind when it comes to decisions made. And that also leads to what we call trade-offs, okay? So as we've said already, we can't have everything, resources are scarce. If we're spending money on buying a soft drink or an energy drink, we can't then spend that money on buying something else, okay? So there needs to be a trade-off. You need to choose how to spend your money, your time, and your energy. These decisions involve picking one thing over another, okay? So that's why we call it a trade-off. Again, for example, this morning, you chose, I should say, sorry, to join this lecture, this module. You could have done something else with that time. Some of you maybe could have went to sleep, catch up on sleep. Some of you could have maybe worked, if anyone works on, you could have chosen to do an extra shift. Some of you could have chosen to go shopping. Some of you could have chosen to do DIY around the house. So these are all trade-offs. You chose to join this lecture. You chose to spend time and effort learning something different or learning something new, hopefully. So trade-offs are quite important. Now, these are me looking at them from an individual perspective, but businesses have the same decision to make. Businesses also have scarce resources. If they're choosing to recruit me, chances are they're making a decision elsewhere not to recruit someone else, or they're making a decision somewhere else not to invest in a different area of the business. If a business chooses that they're going to invest in new technology to improve the capabilities or get better machinery, then that's money that they could have maybe invested in R&D that they can't now invest in R&D. If they choose to improve worker conditions and increase the wages of workers, that means they're making a capital investment. That's money that they could have invested somewhere else, but they've chosen to invest in their workers by improving their wages. So these are all trade-offs, okay? Businesses customers, and human beings in general are always making decisions on trade-offs, okay? These are quite important for us to understand when it comes to business. It also gives rise to what's called opportunity costs. Now, opportunity cost is an economic term, which I'll try to explain to you very soon, but basically it's the distinction of the value of the next best choice, okay? So for example, I am going mobile phone shopping. I've got my eye on the iPhone. Say I want to buy the iPhone 10, okay? That's my budget. I can only afford the iPhone 10. Or I can maybe afford the Samsung S9 or the S10 or whatever it is. That's kind of my budget. I can maybe afford one of those two. But I can only afford one. I can't buy both, okay? So I have to make a choice. What do I want to go with? Do I want to go with the Apple phone, or do I want to go with the iPhone? Sorry, Apple phone or the Samsung phone. If I was to buy the Samsung, then the opportunity cost to me would be the chance to buy the iPhone. I've lost that chance. I now can't afford. I now don't have the resource. I don't have the capital to buy the iPhone. Similarly, if I was to buy the iPhone, I've now lost the facility or the resources to buy the Samsung. So every decision we make has an opportunity cost. So we always decide where we're going to invest. We try to choose the product, the service that's going to give us what we call the most utility, okay? But every decision has an opportunity cost. But even the decision not to do something also has an opportunity cost. Now, I could go shopping and decide, you know what, I'm not going to buy either of these phones. What's the opportunity cost to me doing that? Well, not having a phone. You know, my phone might be broke, or I might have a very old phone and I can't do certain things. And the reason I wanted to buy the iPhone 10 or the Samsung S9 or S10 or whatever it is because I wanted access to the latest technology. So not buying that phone has an opportunity cost of me not having access to that technology. So every decision we make at every turn has a choice. I'm choosing to be here to deliver this lecture. I could be doing something else. I could be celebrating my weekend. I could be sitting in the back garden, although it's raining right now, so I probably wouldn't. But it's an opportunity cost, okay? It's a decision that triggers a lost opportunity. So it's basically the value of a next best choice. So it feeds into what a trade-off is, but it looks at, you know, how doing one thing can prevent us from doing another. So it's a lost opportunity to do something else. So how can we bring that together, or start to bring that together to understand, you know, the business environment? Well, everything we talked about so far has dealt with decision making, okay? And decision making and forward planning basically is what businesses do, okay? Business practice is all about facilitating decision making, forward planning, and looking at ways in which you deal with uncertainty. That's what businesses fundamentally do. It's a science that deals with the application of various economic theories, principal concepts, and techniques to business management in order to solve business and management problems. That's what the fundamental purpose of business economics is. We're modeling why people behave in certain ways so that we can inform our decisions as to what we should do as a business to satisfy some of those needs and wants, okay? There's this definition here I've given you from Spencer and Siegelman, 1992. Basically, business economics is the integration of economic theory with business practice for the purpose of facilitating decision-making and forward planning by management. Okay, so it's about using some of the economic perspectives to be able to understand, well, based on what humans do, what you know, human behavior can be modeled as, what can we understand for our organization? How can that be used to inform what our business does? So first things first, demand. Demand is a fundamental component, okay? In order for you to produce any product, you need to make sure the demand for it. I mean, if you're going to produce something that's not demanded, then well, what's the point? Because you're not actually creating something that people want. So the demand for a commodity basically refers to the amount of it which will be bought for a particular unit of time at a particular price. So again, what I'm willing to pay today for a product or service is what I'm willing to pay right now today. that might not be the same in the future. Okay, so for example, today, if, shall we say, for the sake of argument, that iPhone 10 that I was looking at is available for £1,000, that's how much I might be willing to pay today. But if you were to ask me that question in 4 or 5 months' time, that technology might have become obsolete. New technology might be available that's better. Would I still be willing to pay £1,000 in 3 or 4 months' time? Probably not. Okay, so it's about understanding the demand for a product at a particular given point in time and at a particular price. Now, the demand in economics means effectively that demand for a commodity should have the following features or the following characteristics. Firstly, that there should be a desire for that commodity or service. In order for it to be demanded, it means that people want it either to fulfill a need or a want. There's a desire to consume that commodity or service. There's a willingness to pay its price. Now, that's quite important. Now, I want, as I said already, to have large flat screen televisions in my house. I want to have flash jewelry or flash cars, but am I willing to pay the price for that? Probably not. I don't really have the resources to be able to afford some of those luxuries. So demand only really can be best understood when people are willing to pay that price. So yes, you want it, but you're also willing to pay for it. That's what makes demand. Otherwise, I can't really be seen as someone who's demanding a Lamborghini or demanding a Bentley. It's something I'd like to have, absolutely, but I'm not willing to pay that price because I don't have that money today. So I couldn't be seen as someone that satisfies the conditions of being someone who demands in that context, okay? And similar to the willingness, it's also the ability to pay. Being willing to pay and being able to pay are two different things. Again, I might feel that a Lamborghini at £200,000 is, okay, I think that's a good price. But just because I think it's a good price doesn't mean I'm able to pay that price, okay? It could be that I just think it's a good price for that car, but I don't have the money to pay for it. So again, willingness and ability are kind of interlinked. Being willing to pay is very different to being able to pay. So just making sure that in order to satisfy the conditions for demand, you need to have a desire to buy that product or service. You need to be willing to pay the price, and you need to be able to pay that price as well. So why is that important? Well, basically, we look at it in terms of the law of demand. So the law of demand states that there's a general tendency of consumer behavior in demanding a commodity in relation to the change in its price, which can be prescribed by the law of demand. So what does that really mean? Well, essentially, it means that we will tend, human nature, human behavior, we'll tend to demand more of a certain product or service at a lower price, versus if that product goes up in price, we probably won't have as much. So for example, when I go to my supermarket, I might decide that, you know what, these chocolate bars are available for, I can buy 3 of them at £2. That's quite good. I can buy 3 chocolate bars, £2. I'm happy. I'll pay £2, take those 3 chocolate bars. But if all of a sudden those 3 chocolate bars are now worth £4, or the price has gone up, they're now worth more money, do I want to buy 3? Maybe not. Maybe I'll just say I'll buy 1. I don't want to buy 3. I don't think it's worth the money. I don't think I have the resources to pay, for 3 bars of chocolate. If I spend £4 here, I can't afford to buy something else. So again, it comes down to the law of demand. Basically states that as a consumer, we will demand more of a certain good or service at a lower price, and vice versa. Similarly, I said I like flash cars. Now, say I could afford one Lamborghini at £200,000. If all of a sudden I'm told I can buy 2 for the same price, I'll be like, oh my God, that's amazing, I'll take 2. But if all of a sudden I'm told that the price has gone up to 400,000, well, I can't even afford 1. So, the demand for me would go down, assuming I had that money. Okay, so it's all about thinking the impact between the price of a good and a demand for a good or service. So we could say that the quantity of a good demanded is negatively related to the price of the good. So what do we mean by that? I've got a diagram to try and show you. So basically, as the price of any good or commodity goes up, then the quantity demanded will go down. So do you all follow that logic? If something goes up in price, the amount that people are willing to buy goes down. However, if the price goes down, then the amount that people are willing to demand will go up because they can now afford more. Very logical, yeah? Anyone not following this so far? All pretty clear, okay? So that's the law of demand. So how does that look when we start to try and picture it? So in economics, one of the best things about economics is we try to draw it out. We try to use graphs, use models, use figures, okay? We want to be able to understand how things may look. So this is a demand curve. That line that you see going through the graph is called a demand curve. Now, along the left-hand axis on the vertical, sorry, you have starting at 0, going all the way up to 70. That's the price, okay? So that's the price of this good or service. Along the bottom, you have the quantity demanded, how much people want to buy of it. So as you can see, when the price is close to 60, the demand is quite low, you know, it's less than 20, maybe 5 or 10 people are willing to buy this product when it's worth £60. But similarly, when the product is worth, say, £25 or £20, the demand jumps all the way up to 90. More people are willing to buy it because the price has come down, okay? So that's the relationship. It's called an inverse relationship that demand has with price and quantity. So when price goes up, quantity goes down. When price goes down, then quantity goes up. So it's an inverse relationship, and we can start mapping out what we call a demand curve, the different points, the different bundles. So at £50, you know, maybe 20, 25 people will buy it. At £40, 40 or 45, you know, £30, we've got 60 or 65 people. Then at £20, you know, we've got over 80 people. So again, it's about thinking of the relationship between demand and the price. So that's a demand curve. This is important for businesses because they need to be able to see how much demand there will be depending on the price that they charge for their product. So next we need to think of, well, why does the demand curve slope downwards then? We said it's an inverse relationship, okay? We said that as price goes up, quantity demanded goes down, or as price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is called the income effect. That's basically when the price of a commodity falls, consumers' real income rises, okay? What do you mean by real income? Real income is the ability to buy goods and services, okay? The real purchasing power. So, for example, £1 at this moment in time can only buy me 1 chocolate bar. If all of a sudden the price of chocolate falls, £1 can now buy me 1.5 or 2 chocolate bars. All of a sudden, my real income has gone up. Okay, my ability to consume products and services has increased, so my real income has gone up. Even though I'm still only got £1 in my pocket, the ability of that £1 to buy me more stuff has gone up. Okay, so the income effect is quite important. So consumers' real income will rise when the price falls, so they can now purchase more of the same commodity with the exact same income. So in terms of the actual money in my pocket, that's not gone up. I still only have £1 in my pocket. But what has happened is the price of the chocolate's gone down, and it now means that with that £1, I can afford more chocolate. So that's called the income effect. The second effect that impacts the downward sloping demand curve is what we call the substitution effect. So what we mean here is when the price of a commodity or a product, good or service falls, then it becomes cheaper that it substitute goods, so that other users of substitute goods would shift their consumption. So basically, for example, I tend to buy Kinder chocolate. That's my favorite, you know, that's usually what I'll go for. But what happens when dairy milk goes down in price? All of a sudden, I can maybe afford to buy 2 dairy milk chocolate bars instead of 1 Kinder. I might shift my demand to dairy milk because it gives me more chocolate. Yes, it's not my preferred choice. I would maybe be more willing to buy Kinder if Kinder also went down in price, but Kinder hasn't, and dairy milk has. And I can now buy 2 chocolate bars of dairy milk or 1 bar of Kinder. So I might decide, okay, I want to buy dairy milk. I might shift my demand. So that's called a substitution effect, okay? And that also applies the opposite way around. So what happens when the price goes up of a substitute? So again, if the price of a potential good or service goes up, then people might substitute it for something else. You might not want to consume the same product because the price of it's gone up, or you might be willing to think of the better quality that's available for a lower price. So the substitute effect is quite important, along with income effect, for explaining why demand slopes the way it does. Okay, it's an inverse relationship, and that's quite important for you to remember. So based on those changes, what happens to the demand curve? So that demand curve I just showed you, it actually moves and it can change. So there's two ways in which it can move. Now, this is quite a complex diagram if you're not familiar with economics, but I want you to focus on the line that says D1, okay? So the blue line that's on the outside called D1. Now, at point A, so if you look at point A on the line D1, we've got a quantity demanded, Q1, and we've got a price, P1, okay? As the price goes down, the quantity moves to Q2. So we move to point B and the price goes down to P2. So that's called a movement along the same demand curve. That's basically what's known as a change in the quantity demanded. And that can only usually happen when the price goes down. So the quantity can only ever go up if the price is going down, or similarly, the quantity will only ever tend to go down if the price is going up. So that's what we call a movement along the same demand curve. And that tends to happen with a change in quantity demanded. But if you look below that demand line, below demand line 1, we've now got what's called demand line 2. So what is that? That basically is when we go from one demand curve to another. Now at this point, the quantity demanded is staying the same, but the price is going down. So you're thinking, well, what's happening here? I mean, we just said that when the price goes down, the quantity demanded should go up. But all of a sudden, we're saying that you can shift demand curve. You can have a second demand curve where the quantity demanded is still Q1, but the price has come down to price 2. Why might that be the case? So that might be the case because of a substitution effect. Something else might have came into the market where they're selling it for a cheaper price, or consumers are more willing to buy it because they're getting more for their money. So what will happen in that case is the demand will go down even though your price hasn't changed. Or say your price has changed, your demand hasn't gone down, your price has gone down, but people are still not willing to buy anymore because that was it. That was as much as was demanded in the market. So you've just lowered your price, but it's not made an impact on the demand because people have already got what they need. So when that happens, we call that a shift in the demand curve, okay? So you're going from one demand curve to another, and that tends to come from what we call a change in the demand. It's not necessarily that anything bad has happened, it's just that we've shifted the demand curve. Now that's quite complex. Did everyone follow that logic? Anyone got any questions on where it shifts and where we have a movement? So movement is when moving from point A to point B. A shift.
My question is, so if that happens, would that mean that the product is not quality enough, or people just want to shift to a different product?
That's a good question. It can be a whole host of different reasons. Both of those reasons you mentioned are both valid. So unfortunately in economics, the model doesn't tell us what the reason is. The model just tells us people's behavior. So in this case, you're absolutely right. It could be that the quality isn't good enough, and therefore, people, even though you've changed the price, the quantity is not changing. People, that same fixed group of people that are buying it before are the same fixed group that are buying it today. Or it could be that, people have found a cheaper alternative. So even though you drop your price, people are still buying that cheaper alternative that is, being priced at lower than your product. So that's some of the reasons. So you're absolutely right. Those two reasons you gave could well be the reasons as to why we shift the demand curve. Yep. Anyone else? No problem at all. You're welcome. Anyone else got a question they'd like to ask? No.
Can we use this curve, or basically this, for instance, to look at technology products, for instance? If you look at Apple products, for instance, Apple 7, iPhone 7, for instance, yes, the price may be lowered, but people will still go for higher versions of Apple. Would that fit into this at all?
Yeah, you could well say that. So, for example, you're right, Apple iPhone 7, it's an older phone. The price has gone down, but even though the price has gone down, you're right, people want the newer version. People want the iPhone 10 or 12 or whatever they're on now. So yeah, absolutely, that's a very good point. Again, obsolete. So we call that obsolete products that have maybe gone past their shelf date or their technological diffusion. So absolutely, for example, older iterations tend to fall in price, but that doesn't always mean demand's going to go up. Demand may well stay the same. If not, it might even go down. Even though they drop the price, people might still demand less because they're now moving their attention to newer products. Okay, so we call that obsolation or obsolete products. So that's something that is quite useful to remember. Yep, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, hopefully people are following along. So thank you to those that ask questions there, it's always good. So next focus then is on supply. So we talked about demand and we talked about how people behave, when the price changes or how they would respond in terms of the quantity demanded. What about the supply then? So basically a supply of a commodity means that the quantity that's actually offered for sale, okay? So this time we're looking at how much a firm or a business is willing to supply at a given price at a particular period of time. So again, coming back to the example that was just given there with the iPhone 7 perhaps, if you go back 4 or 5 years when the iPhone 7 was, not longer than that maybe, if you go back 7, 8 years now, when iPhone 7 first came out, I'm sure Apple were supplying many hundreds of thousands of iPhones on a daily basis. So an iPhone 7 is maybe being produced and supplied to the market every single day, hundreds of thousands of them. But today, the exact same mobile phone, iPhone 7, is no longer being supplied. I think it just is what's already out there. They're no longer producing the iPhone 7 in Apple's factories. So again, the supply can change over time. What's being supplied today reflects the market, reflects the environment, reflects the conditions that influence its consumption today. Those conditions will very much change over a period of time, okay? Yes, they might not change very much tomorrow or next week, but certainly over the course of a couple of months, years, definitely for sure, the supply will be impacted. Okay, so that's quite important to remember. Supply doesn't stay fixed forever. It's a reflection usually of a kind of period of time. And it's always referred to in relation to price and time as well, okay? So when we're thinking about supply, we're always thinking about it in terms of what is the price at which we're supplying and what is the time frame that is important here. So what does the supply curve look like? Essentially, it's the opposite of a demand curve. So we saw a demand curve, it was sloping downwards. We said it's got an inverse relationship with price and quantity. Well, supply is the opposite. And maybe thinking, why is it the opposite? Well, think of it this way. If you're a producer, you're a business, when the price is low, do you have an incentive to produce more? Probably not, because you're not going to be making much revenue, are you? Because the price is low, so your profit margins have gone down. If it costs you if it costs you $1.50 to produce a product and the selling price is $2, you're only making 50 cents of profit, yeah? Whereas when the price of that product jumps to $6, all of a sudden, you're making more profit. You're now making $4.50 profit. So the profit margin's gone up. All of a sudden, you're thinking, I need to sell as many as I can. So your supply goes up. So it's got an inverse relationship. So with the supply curve, as the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. As the price goes down, the quantity supplied will also reduce. So it's got the opposite effect. It's got a positive relationship, not an inverse relationship. So basically, supply states that when all other factors remain unchanged, the supply of a good will increase as the price increases. And again, we've just shown that on the graph, haven't we, with the upward sloping supply curve. The law of supply basically states that there's a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. where other things remain consistent. So assuming nothing else has changed, just the price, then the supply will naturally go up. Okay, when the price has gone up, the supply will go up. When the price has gone down, the supply will go down. And again, as I said, that's on the basis that nothing else has changed. So why does the supply curve slope upwards? Well, it's sloping upwards because of two reasons. Reason number one is a law of diminishing marginal productivity. So what do we mean by that? Well, if we think about it, the more we're producing, the productivity of our organization is going up. You know, if you've got one person working in your company and they're producing 2 products an hour, then, you know, you're being fairly productive-ish, you could argue. You're producing 2 an hour, 1 every 30 minutes to satisfy a particular price. But what happens when the price can go further up? If the price jumps to $6, all of a sudden, you might hire two workers because you might think to yourself, hold on a minute, the price has gone up, I want to make more. So all of a sudden, you're now producing 12 between 2 workers. So that's all of a sudden, they're now doing 6 an hour each. So they're producing 1 every 10 minutes. So the law of diminishing marginal productivity impacts the supply curve, okay? The lower the price, the less the productivity you want, because you don't want to be producing more at a lower price. So that's what we call the law of diminishing marginal productivity. And finally, the goal of profit maximization, and that just makes sense because we discussed this already. The higher the price, the more profit margin, and therefore the more you want to supply. Everyone following that okay?
Yeah.
Fabulous. So this time we're going to look at changes in the supply curve. So similar to what we did with the demand curve, when does the supply curve change? So firstly, movements along the supply curve. Now, sorry for the picture quality. I had to try and expand it to make it bigger, but I think it's pixelated the image. But essentially, if we start in the middle, so we start at 55 quantity in the middle, and we start at 16 price, why would people move up on the supply curve? Well, the price is going up, you know, you're looking to supply more. So there's an extension along the supply curve up the way. So when the price is going up from 16 to 22, the supply is changing, it's going up as well from 55 to 75. As a business, you're willing to supply more. But the opposite is also true. If the price falls from $16 to $12, then all of a sudden you're thinking to yourself, it's not worth my time because I'm not making as much profit anymore. Do I want to keep supplying 55? No, I don't. I'm going to reduce that to 40 because of the law of diminishing marginal product. Okay? Make sense?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
My question is,
Yes.
in terms of production and supply, would the supplier or production be looking at pricing as a strategy? I know we've covered strategy quite a lot in the last few weeks. So would that depend on the pricing strategy? For instance, if they are looking at low-cost strategy, if you look at Primark, for instance, their modeling is based on low pricing strategy. They produce more and more and at a cheaper cost and then sell that way. So if they are able to maintain, as you rightly said, the law of production, you know, if they are able to maintain the pricing at low cost, would they not be able to produce more?
That's an excellent point, and that's something we'll look at when we look at markets. So right now we're looking at microeconomics. It's all about business decision making. But what we'll do in the topic we'll look at next week, we're going to look at macroeconomics, and we're going to look at the role of markets in competition. And that's when some of the points you're making will come to the fore.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but that's an excellent point, something to bear in mind and something that you're right is important. But right now we're just modeling based on firm behavior.
All right, cheers.
Okay. Cool, we're almost there, guys. Just a couple of slides left. I'll try and get through them if I can, but we'll just see how we're doing for time. So the first graph we just looked at was a movement along the supply curve, but what can also happen is the supply curve can shift. So what do you mean by that? The supply curve can actually shift from one curve to another. So we've got supply 1, which is called S. Sorry, we've got supply on its own, the standard supply, which is called S, but then there can be a shift to S1. So what happens when we shift to S1? Well, in this case, it's a bit of a surprising move. I mean, the quantity's gone down, but in this scenario, the price has gone up. So why has that happened? Any thoughts on why that might have happened? Because originally we said, yeah, go for it.
I believe in this case, there's high demand for the product. So the more the demand for the product, it pushes the price up.
Perfect. So this is where I've introduced the demand curve. Well done. So the demand influences, I mean, as a producer, we would love to produce more at a higher price, but people aren't going to demand it. As you can see, when the price goes up, the demand goes down. So if you're looking to supply more at a higher price, there's no demand for it. It's just you oversupplying, which is a waste. So in this scenario, when the price has gone up, the amount that you produce will actually end up going down, because otherwise you'll be producing extra that the market doesn't want. Okay, so the demand curve and supply curve can be brought together, and that's really what I want to look at next week. So hopefully you can start to picture why this is important. So we're going to look at why demand and supply come together and how that influences the business economist study of the supply process. We looked at microeconomics today, which is all about understanding, you know, the intricate decisions. Why do we consider demand? Why do we consider supply? But we're going to try and put that together and then move into the macroeconomic model, which then looks at how do markets operate? What's the role of the government in influencing price and influencing market control? And then we'll also look at competition, both in terms of monopoly and also oligopoly competition. And that's really the focus of next week's lecture. Okay. Any questions on what we just covered today?
No question, but very enjoyable. In the first lecture we had on Wednesday, I believe, you shared the business model.
Yes.
That was very, very interesting, because in trying to escape the right race here, one is looking at what can one do. So if you could share that once again, just that particular slide, and then or I don't know whether we need to get in touch with Abhishek. So
Abhishek has access to the full recording. So if you want to revisit the recording, Abhishek is the person to contact. But if you want me to discuss that slide again, I'm more than happy to include that at the start of the lecture next week, just to cover that with you, if that's something you'd like. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. I would love that. Yes.
No problem at all. I'll make sure I include the business model canvas so we can discuss that before we start next week's lecture.
Thank you.
Okay, fabulous. Any other questions from anyone else? No, we all happy? Okay, I'm just going to pause the recording.